Hello, everyone. Welcome to Burning Questions. And this is our special Blank Game Week 32 episode. And obviously, I'm not joined by Andy today. Andy is yellow flagged. He tells me it's got nothing to do with him not owning Watkins, nothing at all. But instead, we've got somebody who's smashing it this season, my good friend Hibbo, who's doing really well. Hibbo, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the invite on as always, Pras. Auto subbing in as usual for Sonaldo. So yeah, season's going okay for me. I'm sitting around 24k at the minute. So I had a small red arrow from say 21k to 24k this week, which was a bit disappointing. But we're on now to talk about free hit 32 and how I suppose how we're going to attack that. Well, for
Yeah.
me to see if I can break that top 10k barrier, I suppose.
Well, speaking of breaking the barrier and sort of taking advantage of the free hit, you and I were just talking before we started recording. Basically, we all have expectations of this free hit because we think, this is the big rank boost that you're going to get. But what was the number on live FPL that you saw? How many have it to play?
Yeah, so I checked the data on live FPL of like I suppose that what chips the teams have left or teams have left in the top 10k, and I think 30% of the top 10k have used their free hit chip. So we're talking about 7,000 teams or 70% still have the free hit in hand, which surprised me a bit, because as we were approaching, I suppose, blank game week 32, a lot of people maybe had in their head that this chip was going to be like a big boost in rank. But I think what we're seeing is that over the last few weeks, maybe since Wildcard 26, that a lot of the good teams are now in the top 10k, and a lot of those good teams are playing a strategy where they're either going to free hit 32 or free hit 34.
Yeah.
So it's going to be difficult to gain rank, I think, apart from, say, the 30% of teams that have used their free hit, like they're maybe in danger of falling out. But then I suppose the flip side of that is it wasn't a very difficult blank game week to prepare for either. So they mightn't be set up too bad.
Yeah.
I think I think sometimes with a free hit, there's a lot of backward thinking, and I think people shouldn't. Well, we want to score well this week, but I think part of the overall strategy is how you play it under the week and how you play out of the week, because
Yeah.
you were going to make your gains before by having double game week players that blank this week, and double game week players that are going to play on the far side of that. So I think a true measure, I suppose, of successful chip strategy is where we are as we kind of hit 35, 36.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you make some great points, and I think the reason for a lot of managers having not used the free hit is basically the wildcard strategy was very popular. I mean, the quarterfinal weekend, which was game week 28 blank, usually is a big trap. I mean, not a trap because it doesn't work, but it basically takes in a lot of free hits where other managers can navigate it. This year, because of the wildcard strategy being popular, pretty much
Mm,
everyone navigated game week 28 without a free hit. So now we sit
yeah,
here, game week 32, 70% of free hits, and I think that number will be represented in 100k, 200k as well. Um,
yeah.
you're going to have a week where now that Salah is going to be heavily captained given his exploits on Monday night. So you're going to have a week where Salah is going to be 180% or 170% captained. You'll have Trent maybe 80, 90% EO. You'll have Trippier maybe 100% EO. Watkins 95% EO. So while there is a temptation or there's a disappointment to see all of that and say, where are my gains? I think people also need to remember that your overall 11, it also means that you're basically going to be gaining regardless because you'll cover pretty much all the players that you need. So don't be too disappointed if your rank boost isn't that rocket boost that you were hoping for. But I think, as you said, it's part of the broader strategy where you want to sort of gain rank, and what you do around this week, which is how you're set up for game week 34 for 37, that's the part of the bigger picture. And I think people need to sort of remember that and not force a lot of punts because I think being on free hit itself, adding all the 11 players will be sort of differential itself.
I think you make a great point because I think part of the temptation is whenever you can pick effectively every player in the game, I think part of the great temptation is they do something outside the box. Whereas, as you're saying, you can't cover your bases with like your rank threats. The players that are expected to score big that are highly owned, you could cover your bases there, and then have a wee sprinkle on a kind of differentials on there. So I suppose that mathematically, like you're trying to nearly guarantee yourself like a 10 point gain or 12 point, for somebody like me that's maybe 20 points off the top 10k, if I thought I could come out of the week with like a 10-point gain, 12-point, I'd be very happy,
Yeah, yeah,
So
totally, totally. All right, so let's talk about today's agenda. What we're going to do is we will do burning question style. Um, oh, 1 second. Let's go back. We will do burning question style. First, a macro view of what what is it that from a macro perspective we're looking at. So basically, we'll look at matchups. So what we've got on the table here is basically all the 8 fixtures. So Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest, Arsenal, Southampton, Brentford, Villa, Leicester, Wolves, Bournemouth, West Ham, Newcastle, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Everton, and Fulham and Leeds. And next to them is basically their XG rank and XG conceded rank. So this is between this pool of 16 teams. Where do they rank? So, for example, Arsenal are the number 1 in terms of XG out of the 16 teams, and Southampton, on the other hand, are the number 16th. So, therefore, a lot of people not going for Arsenal defense should basically consider the fact that they're playing the worst attacking team in the sample that we have for Game Week 32. On the contrary, in terms of XG conceded, you can see here, for example, Newcastle sit at the top of XG conceded rank, and at the bottom here is Bournemouth, followed, or less than them is basically Leicester in number 15. So this is all the XG and XG conceded data since the restart, and essentially just ranked in that order. So let's start with just talking big matchups, right? I mean, in terms of the teams to target, I think it's very clear that Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest, we don't need to spend a lot of time on. Arsenal versus Southampton are the 2 big games, and people will have 6 players from these teams.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a little bit more complicated in terms of where do you go. And the one which I want to talk to you about is Brentford, Aston Villa. So Brentford, since the restart, are 4th in their XG. They're number 3 in XG conceded. I get that there's a little bit of tail off in their numbers. So if you look at basically not since the restart, but the last 6, you'll see that there's been a drop off both in XG and XG conceded. And then Villa is exactly the opposite, where if you look at it from the restart, they're 5th in terms of XG, which is good, but in XG conceded, they're 11th. If you looked at a shorter sample where they've been a lot more in form, then you will sort of see this reverse. So what's your view in terms of Brentford Villa? Where, how do you see that game?
Both teams to score. Kind of feels like it to me. Tony's obviously been a standout pick for Brentford, and you know what? I do think Villa have improved hugely under Emery, but I do fancy them to concede like on the road against Brentford. That's my reading that game. I would fancy Watkins to score for Villa. I would fancy maybe Tony to score for Brentford.
Villa have been pretty good defensively. I mean, they were giving up big chances in the beginning. Yeah. But what is it, like 2 goals in the last 9 games that they've conceded? I mean, so I think, if I was to sort of crystal ball, I would agree with you that it's a 1-1, 2-1, 2-2 kind of game, and no team keeps a clean sheet. But on the other hand, you can also see the reverse, where you see Villa basically getting a 2-0 win because they're just so solid. Or on the other hand, Brentford continuing their good home form and basically getting a 1-0 win with a Tony penalty or something.
Yeah.
So that one's going to be a hard one to call. We'll see where we end up with in terms of some data that we'll look at for home teams and Villa in particular. The other one I think will be popular is Newcastle Tottenham. What do you see there? I mean, Newcastle are the 3rd best XG team and the number 1 in XG conceded. Again, there's been a little bit of a tail off, and they kept a lot of clean sheets at the beginning of the season, not so many in the last few, compared to Spurs, who have had a decent XG conceded, but when you watch them, Longley is out, they're pretty much looking very poor, and also their XG rank isn't the best. I mean, people have gone for Kane, but it's just basically that he's eked out his goal in 2 shots or something. Newcastle win?
Newcastle could win. I think if we're looking at market data, and whenever you're looking at a free hit and you're looking at a free hit week, I do think it helps to look at kind of betting data, market data, especially for, say, do you expect the team to score more than 2 goals? What's the percentage chance of a clean sheet? Because it is such a very kind of short window, and I think Newcastle are rated maybe 33% for the clean sheet. That Spurs, they do have a good record. Kane's record isn't as good away from home. I don't know. Like at the same time, like Trippier is like hugely owned, and I think if Trippier's ownership wasn't as high as what it is, I would consider fading Newcastle defence and fading Trippier. If I'm being totally honest with you, um, their numbers have been good, but I just in games that I've watched recently with Newcastle, I haven't been entirely convinced about them defensively. And I do think if I was to call that game, like I do think Newcastle won, but I think Spurs will score.
Um, well, you'll see in my draft. I think Newcastle defense are still decent, and maybe it's the bias because I watched the Man United game when they were at St James's, and some of the other good teams when they played Arsenal, basically the 0-0.
Yeah,
I just think in big games they do well, and if it's especially at home, I think it's a backable defense. And if you just own Trippier, then you don't own Newcastle defense because I'm expecting, like I said,
yeah.
Newcastle Trippier to be pretty much the player that non-free hitters and free hitters will pick. Maybe him and Watkins, and even Salah. I can't see every single one getting to, but yeah, these are the guys who'll be very very well owned. So if you own Trippier, you don't really own Newcastle defense. So if you're really backing them, then you need
Hmm.
a second defender, which we will come to because there's a defender problem in the free hit. But that's that. And then Crystal Palace. We'll talk about Crystal Palace and the how they've sort of become prime Man City under Roy Hodgson over the last 3 games. But the fear is that it's 3 games, right? And you don't know when the party ends because you remember with Everton when Sean Dyche started, and we all
Yeah.
felt that these guys are basically the biggest defensive wall that there is. The first couple of games that they won against Arsenal, and we just felt okay, we have to back Everton. Where are they now? So you just don't know when the party ends with this new manager bounce, right? And whether this week is the week to back Crystal Palace at home to Everton.
Yeah. Um, I know we will talk about it more in the Crystal Palace, I suppose, specific section, but well, they've been overachieving their numbers in attack, really. So I don't really know how sustainable that is, and like we'll talk about it more when we get into it. But I think given the kind of breadth of options that we are able to pick from, say from Liverpool and Arsenal, I don't know how much will become up in the Crystal Palace, if I'm totally honest with you.
It's a good punt. I mean, when we get to Crystal
Yeah,
Palace, we'll talk about who are the people who we think are worth it. And on
yeah.
free hit, like I think we're at a stage where 5 or 6 people will be owned by everybody, but the rest five are there's about 10 good picks for those 5 spots, and
Mm-hmm.
let's see where people end up with. But I don't hate 1 or 2 Crystal Palace punts. If this is the game against Everton, you've got everything going for you. But if Everton end up winning 1-0, is anybody shocked? I don't think anyone is shocked. So
No.
that's basically always the fear if you go for a Crystal Palace type team. And same for Fulham Leeds. I mean, people are talking about Leeds looking absolutely atrocious, conceding 10 goals in the last 2 games. Can they beat Fulham 1-0? Okay, they can because everybody was saying Fulham's on the beach.
I don't think I would be invested. We can talk about this as we go on, but I don't think I'd be overly interested in investing in Fulham assets as well. Like Andreas, I suppose, is a bit of an option because he's got the penalties and set pieces and stuff like that, and he plays further forward. And Leeds have been as bad, but as you say, once they stop Grassy and the boys coming out and putting it right after 2 heavy defeats, so they've had to win all season, but they definitely have to win now. So I don't know. Like Fulham are in a position where they are relatively safe. They don't have much of a chance anymore, so I don't think they're the same side as what they were in the first half of the season, especially.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now let's do a deep dive on each of the main teams that we're sort of considering for the free hit. So obviously Liverpool are the hot team that everyone's talking about. Suddenly after yesterday's game, that terrific performance against Leeds, there's a couple of things that have happened. Number one, obviously the Trent inverted fullback role, which everyone has been talking about. Why not use Trent's passing ability, get him into that midfield, which is really suffering without Thiago Silva? No one can pass. Basically, getting Trent as the inverted guy, it basically allows a little bit more freedom for Henderson and for Curtis Jones to basically press a little bit more further forward. It just seemed to work. And despite some fears that Salah could be a little bit wide, Jota could be a little bit wide, I think what we saw as the game went on is that Henderson also started to basically take that wide position, and Salah was basically coming back inside, and so was Jota. So you look at basically from the last game, what we've shown on the slide is the average positioning. And so you see here basically number 18 is Jota, number 17 is, number 18 is Gakpo, number 11 is Salah, number 17 is Jota. These are the three furthest forward guys, and they're not wide at all. Salah is not that wide, Jota is not that wide. You then look at Trent, number 66. You can clearly see that his average position was basically in the middle of the pitch. So what was happening was Konate was basically covering for him if there was an attack down the left. But the interesting point is, number 26, Robertson, he's playing left centre back, because you have to, if Konate is covering on that side, who are the two central defenders? It's basically Van Dijk and Robertson. Is it a worry? Because you're looking at Robertson as well, right?
I'm looking at Robertson, but I'm also looking at Trent. So, like as you're saying, he started playing this inverted fullback, and this is almost like a kind of Pep Guardiola-ism, isn't it? The inverted fullback. And I think it suited Trent, because I think in many ways you could say, well, part of Trent's strength is he gets wide and he can cross a ball, and he can cross a ball well, and he can cross it frequently. But what we're starting to see, I think, with Trent when he plays the inverted role is he can use his passing, as you say, on the inside. And I think we saw that with, I think it was his second assist of the night, where he like clipped the ball over the top for Nunes, who finished well.
Very De Bruyne-like.
Very De Bruyne-like. And given that kind of time and space where he kind of broke through from the pocket, I thought it was impressive. And his numbers have been good. Like I looked at his numbers. We're talking the last 6 matches, and he's created 5 big chances. I think only Bruno and KDB have done more. You're talking elite level midfielders, and he places second, I think, for expected assists over the last 6. So inverted fullback or stroke defensive midfielder. It's a small sample. I think it could be good for Trent, because it's going to get him at central on that patch. He had 153 touches of the ball, which was second most in a Premier League match this season. So should be good for bonus and stuff like that. But as you say, it did have a knock-on effect to Andy Robertson, and the tactical switch, what we saw is that only 18% of Robertson's touches came in the final third, which was like his second lowest tally of the season. So I know the obvious caveat to this information is very small sample, but it's all we have, if you know what I mean, Pras. We're always kind of dealing in some way with small samples and trying to take what information we can out of it, I suppose, to aid our decisions for the week ahead.
Yeah.
And if he's not having as many touches in the final third, are you potentially buying like a £7 million defender who's kind of limited attack and appeal? It will get involved in the attack, I'm sure, at some point. But if the brief is for Trent to be more involved in the attack and for Robbo to kind of tuck inside, we might see a wee bit less of him. And I think that maybe adds a bit of fuel to buying a second Liverpool attacker, maybe Gakpo, maybe Jota. It's something to think about.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we're not going to get any more new information, right?
No.
All we know is they did really well in this game. I saw Klopp's interview. The guy was gleaming, right? He was basically saying, we have our Liverpool back. He said this was the best performance of the season. These are his words after the post-match. Which tells me a couple of things. A, he's going to try out this system again. And B, he'll probably go with the same team. So you're getting basically a Gakpo or a Jota for maybe 60, 70 minutes. Because let's remember, Liverpool have another midweek game away to West Ham. So, maybe there's this element of we need to give more minutes to the legs of Darwin Núñez, to Firmino, who will get more minutes against West Ham, maybe even get a start, maybe in Darwin Núñez's case. So if we were to sort of guess that it's going to be the same team and the same system, yes, it's Nottingham Forest. They're just going to basically sit back. So I do get that Robertson's average positioning will be further forward, because if they don't have the ball, then Robertson's going to slightly sort of inch up. And I saw that on a couple of times. Now, he created 0.03 XA. One game, so I'm not using that as a sample size, but in terms of making the point that he did not come forward at all. Now, they were obviously wary of Leeds. Leeds are a much more counter-attacking side. They were careful if Trent is basically inverting. They wanted to have 3 defenders. This may not be the case against Forest. So there is a side of me which thinks if Nottingham Forest are basically going to sit back, Robertson is fine. But then the other side of me is saying, I'd rather have Van Dijk if I wanted to have a defender who, has some attacking threat. I'm not going to have a defender who's basically just covering as a left centre back. And we need to get out of our head that this is the Robertson that we know of old, which is basically bombing forward, cutting into the box. We may not get that. We could. But based on the evidence, I don't think we're getting that against Forest.
He's also, well, I think a point about Forest is for that flank, like for their right flank, for like crosses and chances conceded, they've placed in the bottom 5 this season. So like it is an area of kind of weakness for them. You make a good point. Is Robertson going to get attacking that right flank? And I think it's a point that we probably don't really talk about enough, is that sure he's the number 1 left back. He is nailed, there's no doubt about that. But there is always that bit of Tsimikas doubt. Like I'm not going to say that Tsimikas is going to start against Forest. But
Tsimikas is not going to start.
No, he's not going to start. But I think if you're saying, well, Van Dijk and Robertson, one's cheaper than the other, there's not much. If you're not expecting much attacking threat from Robertson, then you can maybe take that risk out of the equation altogether and go for Van Dijk if that's what you like.
Well, they're going to get a corner. Van Dijk's going to come up. So I'd rather get the chance of a header than a Robertson who doesn't even come up for corners, takes a couple of corners, but is not crossing the ball as much.
Personally, it's something for me to think about as we get close to the deadline, because I am looking at like double Liverpool defence, because as I said, like if I'm going to look at kind of bookmakers odds as we approach this week, Liverpool are like a 55% chance to keep a clean sheet. Them and Arsenal are the 2 best chances in the week. And like we'll talk about Arsenal assets as we go on, but Arsenal have such a wealth of like good, cheap attacking options in the midfield and the forward positions who have assured minutes. Whereas like the kind of trade off here at Liverpool is like we're talking about Gakpo and Jota as being maybe 60, 75-minute type players. Whereas there's a bit more nailedness in some of the Arsenal players, which for me is what's making me think, all right, even if Robbo mightn't be as attacking as what I would like, I might just still go for Trent and Robbo and hope that he does something based on like the fact that it's going to be a home game. Is he going to be a wee bit more attacking as opposed to playing away at Leeds, as you're saying, a counter-attacking side? As the fact that Forest are a wee bit weaker on the right side, is he going to be given a wee bit more license to go and attack that? Rather than try and just second guess it, I might just pick him and go for it. You know what I mean?
So a couple of things. I mean, firstly, for the rest of the pod, we don't care about price because there's so much money. Let's assume Kane is the same price as Tony, Robertson is the same price as Trent, as Van Dijk, as Moreno is the same price as Trent. Price is not a problem. The second thing is Arsenal for me is not really in the discussion, because I know why you're thinking this, because you could go Gabriel in defense instead of Robertson and then get another attacker. But you don't have to do that. You can still have triple Arsenal attack and double Liverpool attack. And my point is, because Salah is going to be 180, 190%, you're not going to own a Liverpool attacker. So if I told you now, you're going to get 6 points from Robertson, guaranteed. I give it to you right now. But what I'm trying to say is I don't want the 6 points from Robertson. I may as well punt on 6 points from Guehi or Cher or anyone else and lose out. Maybe I get 2. But I would rather punt on a Gakpo brace. And basically the thinking is he did really well. Gakpo has basically started all but 2 games, and one of those games was the Chelsea game where everyone was punished, including Salah. So he starts pretty much every game. He plays through the middle, which is the Firmino side. It's basically the left side with the Jota side, which is where Darwin Núñez sort of operates. So when they do the double substitution, they get Firmino on, who replaces Gakpo. They get Darwin Núñez on, who replaces Jota. So let's assume for whatever world we think that Darwin is coming back. I think Gakpo is still safe. Firmino is leaving the club. Gakpo is the future in terms of that central position, which is so important to Liverpool in terms of the first person who presses, the first person who creates the chances. So, in my view, Gakpo is pretty much nailed, especially now, given what we know now. Now, midweek, we don't know against West Ham. We don't know in the double game week. But there's a 5-day break between the Monday night game and the Saturday game. Gakpo's going to start. So, I'm now asking you the question. Robertson gets 6 points. I give it to you now, Hibbo. Do you want the 6 points or do you want to punt on Gakpo?
You're kind of selling this to me now. if I'm being totally honest. It's about going for the ceiling, really, isn't it? Like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, there's comparable players that can get you the six, and you know, like are you going to go for like that 15-point haul or whatever that maybe Gakpo? And like his numbers are good. Like I looked at these last six, and I think he had what 3 goals and an assist,
They're
4
okay.
attacking
So,
returns,
I
and
mean,
like I don't think Firmino's ready. I don't think Luis Diaz is ready. I don't see those boys suddenly being thrown back into the action. And I think, as you said earlier, I think Liverpool are going to start again with Gakpo, and I think they're going to start with Jota, and I think they'll roll out that team again.
so I guess if that's the case, and it's the ceiling point, right? I mean, I don't see Robertson getting a 12-pointer. And if he's not getting that assist and a clean sheet, anyway, we've looked at the data before. Liverpool aren't the best team. Now, against Nottingham Forest, you could argue that they will still keep a clean sheet. I don't fancy that as much. So, anyway, I've made my point. Now, let's come between Gakpo and Jota. Where are you with? I mean, my simple difference is number one, Jota is a striker, gets 4 points for a goal, obviously gets bonus. So, yesterday he scored a brace, Salah scored a brace, Jota got 3 bonus simply because he's a striker. He gets a lot more bonus for getting a goal. But on the flip side, let's say Gakpo gets a goal, he gets an extra point. He will get a clean sheet point as well if Liverpool get a clean sheet. And he doesn't take up that forward slot if you wanted to go for a Watkins, Jesus, Solanke type formation. So you could go for a 3-4-3 with having a Gakpo and still having the forward line that you want to have. What do you think?
I think I think it's a great point. If I kind of think in a straight shootout, if you wanted to give me one, if you wanted to let me pick one here that like really kind of excited me, I think I would pick Jota, if I'm being entirely honest. But I don't think I can do it because like if I have Ollie Watkins, if I've got even Tony, I don't think I'm going to pick Kane, but we're going to include Kane in the conversation. You're talking about Solanke in there as well. Gabriel Jesus potentially in there. Like this forward lines, as you would say, prime real estate, and I just don't see Jota fitting into that. So like he has a lot of players to beat there, and I don't really fancy him to beat mostly because he's minutes. The minutes are a bit of a concern for me.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the minutes.
like Liverpool are effectively playing, and like I said this to you previously, they're playing 6 players for 3 spots, and like now all those players they're back. They're at different levels of fitness, of course, but Jota's not long back himself. So I think what do I think he's going to do in 60 minutes? I don't know. I do think Gakpo of the two is probably the better pick because I think he's assured a bit more minutes, and B, I think his position is structurally better for our FPL teams, I think.
Yeah, and if you told me Darwin Núñez will get a start, I'm not worried as a Gakpo owner. I'm worried as a Jota owner. That's basically my thing. Like Darwin Núñez will get starts between now and the end of the season. And I know we're picking for 1 week, but what if this is the week where he gives Darwin again in the broader context? I think given the team played so well, I think Jota should start. But you never know. Maybe in that 10 minutes, Darwin really impressed Klopp and he wants to give him a start. I don't see a formation where it's Jota. Jota can play through the middle, yes. But I think Gakpo, like I said, is the guy who's doing well in the middle, and this is why Jota isn't getting those minutes in the middle. It's him getting those minutes on the left. So I think let's leave it here in terms of Liverpool. Obviously, when we come to our free hit teams, we'll talk about where we are in terms of Liverpool. But it's very interesting. I think yesterday's game, for me, really opened up the third Liverpool slot, and that's fascinating because the worst thing you can have is everybody picking Trent, Robertson, and Salah, and all three of them are owned 90-95%.
Yeah, but I do think Trent will be quite highly owned.
Trent will
I
be
think
Trent will be
I think that
95.
I think the 2 assists really it did people in the free hit maybe no favors because he hasn't really set the world alight in terms of his point scoring like in FPL this year and his price. And I think like loads of people still kind of have that discussion where they say, "Oh, we don't necessarily believe that he's worth his price," regardless of the fact that he's probably still one of the best options this week. So I think him chalking up a 2 assists in Monday Night Football, then people will go, "All right, now we have to buy him," and it's nearly narrowed the window of where you could possibly make your gains, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. But
Yep, I do. I mean, for the punters, there's always the option of going Gakpo, Jota, and Salah, and hoping that Liverpool win 8-1 or something. And basically, but the problem is Trent will still get 3 assists in 8 goals. So what are you gaining by not going for him? I think most will have Salah and Trent. So let's
I think so.
let's leave it there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Let's go to Arsenal. So Jesus is back. Last 3 games he started. Played about 60, 70, and 59 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done is compared in the last 3 games, which is a hugely small sample. So the problem again is, like you said, like we were looking at Liverpool, we're just trying to get information out of 3 games. But what we wanted to, the point where what we're trying to make here is a little bit different. This is basically showing XGI created in the last 3 games, not per minute, not per 90, total XGI. And why we're doing it is because there's an argument to say that Jesus is only playing 60, 70 minutes, or maybe even less, whereas Odegaard will play 90 minutes. But the point here is, even in those 50, 60, 65 minutes, he's created almost 4 times the XGI in the last 3 games. This is basically heavily contributed by 2 tap-ins that he's had and 1 penalty. However, even despite that, he's sort of beating Odegaard in terms of the massive chances that he keeps getting. So for me, a lot of people, I mean, pretty much everyone will have Martinelli given what he's been doing in the last few weeks. A lot of people will have Saka. And the next slide is going to be on Saka, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is third, Arsenal. Where are you with Jesus, Odegaard, Gabriel, Ben White?
I think I'll definitely have Saka. I don't know, we'll talk about Saka in a wee bit more detail. But he's a personal favourite of mine. I think his minutes are great. He's obviously got the penalties. I'd put recently hasn't been great, but I'm still going to back him now. I'll have another midfielder. I think I'll have Martinelli. I think recently, like, Martinelli's kind of looked like a bit more of like an exciting type of pick. Like he's averaging, like, whenever I look at, say, over the last 8 game weeks, which is a fairly big sample, I think he was averaging 8.3 points per start, and he like produced 10 attacking returns and like 9 appearances over that period. So like he's very much banging form. So I think he would be somebody that I'd be very much looking at now. Jesus as appealing as kind of like a differential option now. This is a wee bit macro, so like bear with me. Quite often, like before, like, I would have wrote kind of threads on Twitter and stuff like that, and quite often I would have wrote them before, like, say, like a big blank game week, and I would have talked about the kind of player composition of the top 10k, because I thought at times it gave you an angle of like how you could potentially attack the week. Now, I think it's a very limited value this week, because if 70% of teams are like, if 70% of teams are potentially going to be on a free hit, well, then the player composition of the top 10k doesn't really matter, because it's all going to become about the players that are playing that week, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But what I did notice is that Gabriel Jesus had like ownership in the top 10k, like 1%. So he's effectively not in any of the teams that aren't going to free hit. He's effectively not going to be in any of the teams that are going to free hit in 34 unless they decide to sign him this week. So I do think that Jesus does have that kind of differential appeal that maybe Odegaard wouldn't have, because he's nearly like a legacy player that people have been hanging on to navigate through this week, if you know what I mean. And if I look at like Jesus, since he came back, he's had like 4 goals, 6 bonus points, 26 points in fantasy over like the last 3 games. Now, like, Arteta's very much easing him back in. He hasn't played 90 minutes.
Not even 70.
No, he's averaging, I averaged it out, he's averaging 67 minutes per appearance over the last 3 games. But if I look at his last 6 and compare his last 6 to like every other Arsenal player's last 6, he still received the most big chances, which is 7 big chances. And that's inclusive of his reduced minutes in the recent, say, 3 matches, and the substitute appearances as he was being reintegrated back on the side. He maybe had 2 or 3 substitute appearances where he didn't start. So he is high ceiling, like, and that, I think, if I'm going to look at maybe his point potential, his ownership, and his ceiling, he is kind of attracting me. But again, the forward slots are tight. Like, it's just, I haven't decided. Like, I give you a free hit team for the purposes, obviously, of the video, but I'll definitely change my mind as I approach the Friday deadline, and like Jesus is somebody I'm massively looking at.
Yeah, I'm the same. I haven't decided. The other thing is Arsenal have Man City in midweek. So I know this is a Friday game, and they have the Man City game on Wednesday. So there's enough gap. But even the slight limp that Jesus has, or something, he's going to take him off. Nketiah's back now, by the way. Um, Trossard is obviously always available. So it's an X minutes thing, right? I mean, can you tell me that there is no chance that they're 2-0 up and Arteta doesn't take Jesus off on the 55th minute and give some minutes to Nketiah? It can happen. On the other hand, it's little bit like Haaland, right? Except that Jesus isn't the one scoring all the goals from Arsenal. In Man City's case, you can take a punt on a halftime Haaland, or it's not even a punt. Like, you can go for a halftime Haaland because you know that if the score wasn't 2-0 or 3-0, he would have stayed on until they score 3 goals, in which he's contributed 2 goals. He would have played 70, 80 minutes, and then he goes off. I think in
Yeah.
Jesus' case or in Arsenal's case, they have enough goal scorers. They have enough, sort of, the system doesn't rely on Jesus anymore, especially since his injury, where 2-0 up, he can come off. So for me, I think if you were to simulate this many, many times, I think Jesus outscores Odegaard. But there are scenarios in which the ceiling for Odegaard, because Odegaard is playing on the 85th, 89th minute, gets that second goal on the 88th minute when Southampton are basically trying to score after 2-0. That for me just rings in my head that I want my player to be playing there pretty much as many minutes as possible on the free hit. And so this is why I'm leaning, at least in my draft at the moment, towards Odegaard, extra clean sheet point, and we're expecting a clean sheet. We had shown data here, by the way, that out of all the teams, Southampton are the worst attack. And it's ironic that everybody's sort of all aligned and said, let's all go for triple Arsenal. And let's all go for triple Arsenal attack. I think people who are not on a free hit and have got Arsenal defenders, this is the game. Even if there's no Saliba, this is your game. You're probably going to get a clean sheet here. So, go on.
I think you make a good point about the points being shared about for Arsenal. Like, and it was something I looked at just before we came on the stream. And like, if I'm looking at Saka's last goal, I know obviously he scored 0 against West Ham because he missed a penalty. But like against Liverpool, he scored 1. Like in terms of fantasy points, he scored 1 point. 1 point against Leeds, 18 points against Crystal Palace, 3 points against Fulham, and 2 points against Bournemouth. But on those games, Arsenal were scoring bucket loads of goals. Do you know what I mean? So like they do have players like Martinelli, as you're saying, Gabriel Jesus, and Odegaard, that normally how I would feel about a triple up in attack as normally I would feel that it's overkill, because if there's a goal, I would like to be in both ends of the involvement, if that makes sense. So like if there's one goal, I would like to have the player that's going to assist it. I would like to have the player that's going to score it. And I don't want, like, I suppose, on effect, a third wheel who's not going to be involved. But Arsenal's XG is that good, their attack's that good, Southampton's defence is that bad. Arsenal, I'd expect them to blow them away. I don't really see a problem in tripling an attack for this week, if you know what I mean. Whereas normally it would be a play that I wouldn't really like to make. And then again with Gabriel Jesus, I know he's a bit of a favourite pick, especially with the analytics community, but he's not really. Like, I think Arsenal have at times been a wee bit shaky kind of defensively over the last period, especially without Saliba. They've conceded in each of the 4 games that Saliba's missed out. So I think all eyes are going to be on team news, and like Neil's team news coming out maybe on Thursday or Friday to see if Saliba's going to be included.
I don't think Saliba's in. I mean, all the news is that he's struggling for the Man City game. People aren't even talking about Southampton.
So I don't know how interested I would be in Arsenal defence, if I'm being totally honest. I think their attackers are that good that that's where I would want to be. And as I say, like, normally I wouldn't want to play a triple up, but in this occasion I think it's warranted, nearly.
Fair. All I'm saying is, Gabriel owners, if you have him maybe on a non-free hit, and even on a free hit if you wanted to be a little bit different, and if you're struggling for that third defender apart from Trippier and Trent, especially if not going Robertson, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, you can see here, XG of 0.7. The guy always is involved. You can always think that in every 5 or 6 games, he's going to get one major chance to score a goal from a header. And you know,
Ben White's producing kind of similarly good numbers too, isn't
he is, and his XGI is even higher than Gabriel here. But I don't know. For a one game shootout, I'm picking Gabriel because of that goal. I want that goal from the
he?
corner.
Yeah.
Saka corner, Gabriel header. Ben White is a little bit hit and miss whether you get that or not. And I have this feeling where if Southampton are going to sit back, then there's less space for him to sort of go inside and then cross the ball versus, where he got a little bit of space against a Liverpool or some of the other teams that they faced more recently. But look, I mean, he's gone completely mad, and I hate that. I owned him for 26 game weeks, and he did nothing, like nothing, including some 59th minute subs, and basically then he turns into this prime uh, best right back in the world, prime Trent.
Yeah, I think most people moved off him, but I think most people moved off him for logical reasons as well. Like, the substitutions, and they did look at that period of time as if there was a wee bit of X-Man's threat. So I understand why people did move off. But I think just if we're going to kind of close out in Arsenal, like one stat that I did look at is like over the last 9 matches, they're basically averaging 3 goals a game in the Premier League. So I do think, like, if we're going to talk about the attack and stuff like that, I do think people should bear that in mind, that there should be enough goals in Arsenal, especially against Southampton, that all your attackers could potentially be within the points, so.
And if you're a fan of narratives, they'll want to sort of put in a performance before Man City after 2 draws, right? They'll want to show them that they're still in the title race. So if you like that lovely narrative, then that's also there.
Goal difference, maybe.
Goal difference is always there. Exactly. Man City are about 7 or 8 ahead. So maybe an 8-0, 8-1, even better for the triple attackers. Anyway, so closing out Arsenal, there's one more thing. I mean, there's this thing going around that Saka maybe isn't the greatest pick because, Saliba is not playing. And I saw, I think FPL Bernie on Twitter, his tweet got very popular where basically he was showing these passing maps and showing that Saliba was the one passing to Saka, and because he's not there, he's more isolated because Holding isn't the guy who's making the passes. It's still Gabriel, and then he's basically shifting the ball out left. So what we've shown here is basically the passes received by Saka from game week 1 to game week 27 versus the last 4 game weeks, which is basically the ones that Saliba has missed. And there's absolutely no difference in terms of where he's been receiving the ball. There's absolutely no difference in terms of the XG that Saka has had, 0.3 per 90 versus 0.3 per 90. His minutes per XGI is actually better. So, long story short, I think Saka is still a good pick, and don't sort of get, this short-term bias in terms of he's not looking so great just because he's missed a penalty. You saw what Salah did, right? After missing a penalty, the returns can come. So I think, long story short, I think Saka is a definite pick in my team, and I think you mentioned that's the case for you as well.
That is the case. I saw a good thread on Twitter. I shared it with you earlier. So it's from a guy called Chris Glover, and his handle is like @PL Fantasy. Now, Chris did about a kind of comparison between. He looked at, say, Saka with Jesus and without Jesus, because like you're talking about passing out of defence and like how good or potentially Saliba being out, how bad that could be for Saka. Now there's a bit of narrative around, is he good with or without Jesus, which has kind of come out recently.
It's the same window. Yeah, so Saliba's been out while Jesus is back.
So this, people are trying to drive this narrative as well. And Chris did a comparison basically of kind of non-paying XG and like expected assists as well. And like with Jesus, I think per 90, like Saka's producing 0.28 non-penalty XG, and without he's producing 0.27, so practically identical.
Nothing.
And in terms of XA, it's like 0.25 with Jesus, and without it's 0.28. So it actually seems as if there's been a bigger impact on Martinelli, looking at this thread from Chris, because it's saying that Martinelli with Jesus, he's running at a non-pen XG of 0.25, and without he was running at 0.42, which is kind of significant because the narrative that I'm seeing on kind of Twitter is kind of backward to that. People are saying Jesus is good for Martinelli and bad for Saka, whereas I think we should just accept that these are all good picks. I think that we should look at their underlines over a kind of broader period of time and accept that they're all in their own rights good picks. And, sometimes as we've seen with the penalty miss at the weekend, variance takes control, and
Yeah.
we can pick the player, but we don't have control over whether Saka's going to skew the penalty, past the keeper's right hand side. That was the difference between a 0-pointer and a 10-pointer. And then how's your narrative then? Then people are talking about, Saka's an amazing pick going on this week as opposed to he's a bad pick. That's how simple it is, really.
Yeah. Okay. I think we all agree. Pick 3 of your attackers if you're going on a free hit. I don't think there's a wrong answer. Any of these 4 could haul a 15-pointer. Any of these 4 could blank. So just make your peace with that, and I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, now we talk about Barcelona. Sorry, I mean Crystal Palace. And here we are. Basically, what we wanted to do is look at under Roy Hodgson. By the way, I should also say that Seb did a really nice segment on Crystal Palace. So there was some data that I had dug up which overlapped with what he'd done. And so I took that out because he's done about, I think, 4 or 5 slides on Crystal Palace post Roy Hodgson. So I urge you to check that out. What we've done is simply show the touch map of where these players are positioned under Roy Hodgson. And I think what you see here is the numbers are not very clear on my slide. So 1 second, let me just open. Right, so the furthest forward is basically Jordan Ayew. Jordan Ayew has, ever since, so the first game that he played with Leicester, Zaha started and then he went off with the injury. And so when Jordan Ayew took over, you can see in this chart, he is number, sorry, let me look him up. He's number 11. So number 11 is, Zaha, and then Jordan Ayew is number 9. So you can see in the most recent game, which is on the left, Jordan Ayew is the furthest forward in terms of, where he's receiving the ball. Olise, on the other hand, which is number 7, is actually fairly back. I mean, I would say in terms of between him and Eze is number 10. He's the one sort of helping, creating the XA. He's not the one generating the XG. So as we've seen in the games, I mean, Olise is on all corners and some set pieces. But the person who's getting into the box, receiving these crosses, is basically Eze and Jordan Ayew. So with Olise, if you were to pick somebody for the next 6 game weeks, basically my summary looking at the stats and looking at this average position is you probably want Olise because he has a lot of route to points. He'll get you that corner assist. He may take a free kick, the worldly free kick against Man United that we all remember. And he may get a lot of crosses and chance creation, so good for bonus. So a lot of routes to points. But if you want that big haul, then I think between Ayew and Eze is where you want to go. What's your take on it?
I've been kind of hugely impressed by Palace since Hodgson took control because, he's one of these kind of managers that's maybe criticised, I think, unfairly because of his age, if that makes sense. And he's turned them around. We're talking about Palace now, 3-1 in the bounce. And if we look at the match on Saturday, Eze nailed it twice. And Eze's really kind of started coming on his own a wee bit under Hodgson. You're talking about 3 goals and assists, 4 bonus points over that kind of 3-match period. So that's kind of top form for heading on the game week 32, and you're talking about high ceiling. Now, I have a quote from Eze, and I thought it was kind of interesting. And he basically says, I think Hodgson has just given us the confidence in what we're good at. And he says, we know what we're capable of, but he's given us a license to go and do it. We're playing with a lot more freedom, more energy and positivity. So I thought they were kind of interesting sound bites coming out of Palace after these kind of 3 games. But now I think if we look at them at a kind of expected data level, if we're going to talk about the XG, they registered 10 shots, I think, against Leicester, but the total XG value was only 0.87. So I think we kind of have to keep our kind of expectations in check here. This isn't a team that's going out and putting up 2.5 XG or anything like that. And I don't think that kind of number would be kind of conducive to kind of 2-0 wins and stuff like that going forward.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, what interests me a wee bit about Palace is, and I'm sure we'll touch on it now, is defence. Because under Vieira, they were always kind of tight defensively. Palace always kind of kept it tight at the back, and their XG numbers, or for their XGC numbers, were always kind of consistently good. And I think, you're looking at a couple of options ahead of this game week. And like, if we're looking at the fixture against Everton, I think they're rated maybe a 41% chance of a clean sheet. So like who do you like in the defence?
I mean, nobody has that upside. I mean, shout out to Patrick Van Aanholt of the days past. Nobody has that upside. So I think you're looking at Anderson's, Gahey's of the world, or the goalkeeper, basically, who's very popular, given that, it's a simple play on clean sheet odds. And like you said, I think they've been okay. Now, I would say they had 0.8 XG conceded against Southampton. They kept a clean sheet. 0.9 XG conceded against Leeds. They did concede. And they had 0.2 XG conceded against Leicester, and they did concede. So I would say sort of manage your expectations. It's not that watertight Roy Hodgson. I think he is sort of had them off the leash a little bit. So the thing is, this is Everton. And Everton, the way they play, obviously the old Burnley, there's going to be a lot of crosses coming in. You just never know which of those crosses is sort of scored. You can't predict here. We just sort of go with it that they'll have more possession than Everton because that's just the way they play. And they should come out maybe a 1-0, 2-1 kind of game. So you hope to get a clean sheet point. You hope to get a return or a couple of returns max from whichever player you pick, but be prepared that this is a punt. I mean, this is not, you don't have penalties here to sort of go with you. You see where I'm going. I mean, why would you pick an Olise, Ayew, or an Eze over Tony, Solanke? People on pens who are putting up excellent numbers over a larger sample size.
Yeah, that's that. Like, in terms of the attackers, that's basically where I sit. It's like we're talking about triple Arsenal attack. You're talking about, say, double Liverpool attack. Put Watkins, Solanke, Tony, maybe Kane if you were going to stretch a budget and you were afraid of his ownership. Possibly you might try and shoehorn him in, or some people might try and shoehorn him in. And then I think about these pass attackers and think, they could be a good punt. They could work for somebody, but I don't really think they're for me. But like, Sam Johnston, maybe the goalkeeper, in case anybody isn't aware of who he is, he's been deputising for Gaeta for a while, and he's done well. Like, I think if we look at his numbers, he's made 11 saves in the last 2 weeks, and he's collected 13 points in fantasy. So I think something to consider with Johnston is, after the game is kind of mundane, if it is boring, if there's nobody to kind of putting their hand up and going scoring the goals and taking the bonus, he could be in for a haul if he keeps a clean sheet and he's making a few saves. So no, I think he's basically where my interest in Palace kind of stops and ends, if you know what I mean. So I don't think I'll have Anderson or Gahey, and if I did, they would potentially just be a sub.
Fair. Yeah, so I think both Zaha and Gaeta are out until end of April. So you're going to get your Johnston start. You're going to get your Jordan Ayew start. I don't know. I'm sort of I'm thinking Eze or Jordan Ayew could work as your fifth midfielder if you wanted to go for a 3-5-2 structure. So I think it's one of those where, like I mentioned, there's about 10, 11 good options for the last 4-5 slots. So, if you didn't want to fancy a Watkins away from home, or you didn't want to get a Tony because Aston Villa are looking much better defensively, or you don't want to go for a Solanke because Bournemouth have improved, but ultimately they're still a bottom 5 attack. Those are reasons that people could say, I just want to sort of tap into this Roy Hodgson wave and get something. So I don't hate it, but personally I would not go there. And Olise, I'm a little bit lukewarm, like I said, because most of his numbers are from assists. Now he could get 3 like he did in the other game, but you just can't plan for that. And the other thing is, Everton are monsters of set pieces. You're not scoring. I mean, it's very hard to go against a Tarkowski to score a set piece. So if Olise is the one crossing the ball, maybe that's not the route how which they get the points. And the other thing is, they had 0 shots on goal against Southampton in the first half. So this team could easily show up and do nothing for 90 minutes. Or they could turn it on against Everton and score 3-0. So this is a complete punt territory. And if you wanted to go there, fair game.
Yeah, agreed.
So I mentioned Ollie Watkins. So let's talk about Ollie Watkins. Obviously, man is possessed in terms of what he's been doing. I mean, this is form, right? I mean, when people say form doesn't exist, this is form. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's been a change, a tactical change, where Emery has said, look for Watkins. Watkins is making the most. I think he's made the most number of runs into the box of all strikers for the last 6 game weeks. So basically, all he's doing is making runs, and his team has been told find him. And you can see all of his goals just basically standing on the last man, making a run, getting the ball, scoring. So high confidence. The team is playing for him. Question is, they're playing a very good Brentford team. Brentford have been very good at home. Overall, defensively, Raya has been very good. So basically, what we did was in this chart, look at what Watkins has done in the last 6 home versus last 6 away. Essentially, last 6 home, he's got an XG per 90 of 0.6, which is awesome. But away, it's XG of 0.7, which is even better. So I guess I want to keep this section short because pretty much everyone's going to go for Watkins. But the answer is the guy is almost as good, if not better, away from home, and Villa are almost as good away from home, if not better. So I think Ollie Watkins is a go, right?
I think he's extremely difficult to leave out. Because I think if we're going to look at him in the Emery era or the Emery period, it's like he got a brace and assist against Newcastle at the weekend, and I think that was maybe 17 attacking returns and 17 games since Emery took over, and like the only player in the league that's better, that's Haaland. So this is the kind of level of output that he's been. Obviously, he's not Haaland, but this is the level of output that he's been playing at in fantasy. Now, Newcastle are no mugs, as we said earlier in the programme. They're a top tier defence. He hit the woodwork. Pope made some good saves, and I think he had a very marginal offside as well. So, there was a potential that this haul could have been even bigger than it already was. And I think, like, if we're going to look at underlying data, and I've looked kind of specifically since the restart, he's fifth in the league for non-penalty XG. And I think his MPXG was like 8.04. And like the company he keeps is just elite. Like he's in there with Haaland, Salah, Tony, and Rashford, and they've just been some of the best players in the game so far. So, do we need to be as fantasy managers taking a risk to go without Ollie Watkins before like Brentford? Like Brentford have been good, but I wouldn't really consider it like a difficult fixture. I would expect Watkins to score. So personally, I think Watkins is basically locked in my team.
Let's move on. I think he's going to be 80-90% owned. This is one risk you don't need to take. I mean, we can
No.
talk about Kane and you can go against a Kane risk because the team is looking poor. It's a more difficult fixture away to Newcastle for all the reasons you said. Yeah, there's no reason to back against. And he'll be 90+% owned. So, last slide in terms of teams discussion. There's some good home games, right? Apart from the teams we've talked about, there's some good home games. There's Leicester at home, Bournemouth at home, Fulham are at home. So basically, we've got this table up, which is basically all season minutes per xG created in home games only. And as you'd expect, Arsenal are number 1, Man City number 2, Liverpool number 3, Newcastle number 4. Nothing surprising here. Brighton 5. At the bottom, a point that Luke made before game week 29, I think, or 30, that Leicester are the absolute bottom in terms of minutes per xG, which is shocking to me. I mean, I've always thought of Leicester as such an attacking team, and the data here shows it. 101 minutes per xG. They can't create a single xG or one xG in 90 minutes across the season. What do you make of that?
As a stat, that is quite surprising. Like I watched Leicester against Man City at the weekend. I watched the full game, and Leicester came under the game. But like what I would say is game state was like a big factor because like effectively Man City were 1-3-0. They made a whole raft of changes. They took off their key men, Haaland off, KDB off, whoever, Grealish off eventually. And then we saw Leicester kind of grow under the game. I think they had the post. Madison by rights, like should have scored. So I do think from like a fantasy perspective, if I was going to boil it down to like one player, I think the only person that would be interested is Madison. And I do think against Wolves, I think it's regardless of this XG, I think if anybody's going to do anything, it is Madison. But it's hard to fit in. Like, where do you stand on Madison?
Well, this is the thing. We've just talked about Crystal Palace. and the kind of position that Eze and Ayew are taking, for me, I can't justify. And again, I'm not talking about price. Let's all assume they're all the same price. I can't justify Madison over. I mean, you can think about maybe a new manager bounce with Leicester or whatever that may show up, and we can't account for that. We don't know if that comes. What I would think is that Dean Smith would be a lot more focused on getting them showed up at the back. That's just the kind of manager that I associate him to be. So within that, I think this is a showed up defensive performance where Wolves is a little bit attacking, but Leicester are defensively looking a little bit better. This is my guess, right? And then they get a couple of counterattacks, and maybe if we were talking about a Leicester win, that they win 1-0, or it's a 2-1 game. But I don't see this. Lopetegui has been very good with Wolves, so it's not that easy of a game that I think I can back a Maddison over an Eze or an Ayew, or a Tony or a Solanke.
Yes, I think the only stat that I seen that kind of interested me about the game was that Wolves have kept just one clean sheet in the road all season. Like you're going back as the game week 5 when that was. So that's one kind of glimmer of hope. But again, they're not a team that I would expect to see to get beat convincingly, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't expect to see Wolves get hammered. So no, I'm kind of in a similar boat with you. Madison could make a cut. And my thoughts a bit. But then recent performances haven't been good. When I know people bought on them for the double game week 29 and the good fixture immediately after with Bournemouth, and he's been hugely disappointing. And I think that's obviously in a lot of people's thinking as well with Madison.
Yeah.
He's had good fixtures and he hasn't performed. So now when you're going on this, it's hard to kind of justify picking him when you can pick every player in the game effectively.
I mean, to be fair, those were under Brendan Rodgers, so you could sort of say maybe it's okay. I mean, he 0.7 XGI against City. That was one big chance that he got as well. Bournemouth, he did nothing. 0.2 XGI. Aston Villa 0.14. Crystal Palace 0.11. These are pretty poor numbers, but yeah, I think it's a punt, and I'm personally, I find it hard to justify it against any penalty taker. Just for that odds of him getting a penalty. Now, the only one that if you told me right now that Iheanacho is starting, if we get a leak that Iheanacho is starting, maybe that's interesting. Maybe that becomes a little interesting. What else do we see here? There's Bournemouth. Bournemouth are the 5th bottom in terms of minutes per XG. However, they have been doing a lot better. I mean, that performance against Spurs was fantastic. Solanke has been doing what everyone expected, or Analytics FC expected Solanke to do over the last few game weeks. His stats have been great. So, Bournemouth, what do you think?
I would just call it Solanke. I wouldn't. Maybe they've got.
People are saying Billing is an option, which I think is BS.
I wouldn't touch Billing. Tavernier, I've seen people mention, but again, it wouldn't be for me. I think if we're going to distill it down into one player, I think Solanke is up again. And if we look at his last 4, he has produced fairly decent goal threat. He's had 15 shots in the box in the last 4. Nobody can beat it. But then if we look at XG, because that's the metric really, he's been best for non-pen XG over the last 4 games, and best for non-penalty involvement. So there's some good numbers. And I think the home match against West Ham did okay against Arsenal. I watched the full game as well there. I think it would have been a different game if Saka had scored the penalty, because of games.
I think so.
They would have went 3-1 ahead, and then they could have really went for the throat. Whereas it was they kind of were buoyed by the fact that they missed a penalty and they scored just straight away.
Yeah.
They don't have an easy run at the minute with this kind of Europa Conference League, and now that games are kind of starting to pack tightly together, I think you might start to see a wee bit of tiredness in the fact that they're still going in that competition. But I looked at the last 6 games for West Ham, and on 3 occasions in the last 6 games, they've conceded more than 2.5 XGC. So that was against Brighton, Newcastle, and Arsenal. So there is the potential there that they could get battered, although a caveat there is that Brighton, Newcastle, and Arsenal, well, specifically Brighton and Arsenal, they're kind of top tier 1 attacks in the league, so that isn't disgraceful, but the potential is there that West Ham can ship a few goals. So I do think Solanke's he's on my he's borderline for my draft at the moment.
Yeah, same. He's basically first sub for me, or between him and Tony is where I'm at. But we'll talk about our drafts in a second. There's Leeds here. I think 11th, 12th on the table. Sorry, Fulham. Fulham are 13th on the table. They play Leeds. Any love for Fulham? If Mitro was fit, he'd be popular.
If Mitchell was fit, I think it would be a lock. I know some people have been talking about Vinicius, but Vinicius was dropped.
He was, yeah.
Recently,
They had
so
Andreas and Dan James basically share duties in terms of playing false nine.
Yeah, I think if you're going to boil Fulham down to one player, I think at the minute you're boiling them down to Andreas. But then if you're going to call midfield prime real estate, how do you get Andreas onto that side? Like if you were going to put Andreas onto your side and play like a 3-4-3, the chances are he would be on the bench. Do you know? So I don't really see where you're putting him in your midfield, if I'm being totally honest. Like some people that have kind of had Andreas and have been holding him to try and navigate with a free hit might do well, but I doubt that many people in a free hit will pick him, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair. So speaking of people not on a free hit, what I did was when we posted the fact that we're doing this, I wanted to give some time. So before we go to our free hit drafts, to people who are not free hitting. So I think this is a good point, a good segue to say that popular players or people that may have an Andres Pereira who may not be in the core free hit team are good picks. I think there's nothing wrong with, an Andres Pereira could match an Eze, could match a Maddison because of that penalty he gets or that set piece that he gets or just because of how poor Leeds have been looking. Similarly, if, within Arsenal, if you don't have the right three Arsenal, you have Gabriel, you have White. I think these are all fine picks. Let's say you get two, you can get to two. Sorry, hold on. Where was that noise coming from? Anyway, so my point is, if you don't have the ideal three, and let's say you only get to two Liverpool, I think this is fine, right? It's not the end of the world if you get to a two Liverpool and you can't get to a third Liverpool asset because we're struggling to find the right third Liverpool asset.
Yeah, I think people that have committed to navigating a week without a free hit, I think obviously they're not going to be able to make wholesale changes, and obviously they're going to have to stick with basically the side that they're going on the week with, although some people might have two free transfers. But as you say, they're now going to be on a lot of kind of differential options. Like some of them might have like Raya goalkeeper, they might have double Brentford defence, things which the us in a free hit we're looking at and we go, we don't, we obviously don't want that in their nice shiny free hit. But it could work for them this week, and I always think that's a danger with a free hit. Like we have unlimited choice, but the people that do have like differential kind of players, they could still do well this week. Yeah. And I don't think it's any reason to panic.
Like people with Raya, I think Raya could get a 12-pointer.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like against Watkins, he's going to make saves.
Yeah.
He just needs a clean sheet really, like which, given Brentford's output and underlines, I don't think it's impossible at all.
So I'm going to read out a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
For non-free hitters. The first one is, can a non-free hitter survive by only playing 9-10 players, worried if it's a high-scoring week the free hit managers will propel? This is from Black Dragon.
I think it depends on their overall strategy. I think that question is nearly hard to answer in isolation because I would want to know, like say as we're approaching double game week 34, are they going to want Liverpool players for double game week 34 as well? Now, or are they going to free hit in double game week 34? Because if it was a case that they weren't going to free hit in double game week 34, well, I would be saying them, don't be playing with 9 players. Go and get yourself a couple of Liverpool players now that are going to maybe double down the line.
Absolutely.
If you know what I mean. I think it would be an effective hit. They maybe take a -4, even a -8. They get on players that are going to cover the blank, and you're going to get 2 fixtures out of them in a very kind of close window. So
perfect answer. That's what I was going to say as well. It really depends on what your strategy is. If you don't have a free hit left later, and you're taking hits to take out Man United players, Brighton players, Man City players, you're going to have to take hits again to get them back. So there's a balance. Whereas if you're taking hits for Liverpool players and you don't have a free hit, it's completely different. Or even maybe take a hit for a West Ham player who has a game now and then a double later. So it's really so team dependent, but I think there is no hard and fast rule. You can see here in this discussion, we're all landing on about 7-8 picks that we all agree on. The other 3 are punts. I mean, could Solanke, Eze, Madison all blank? Of course, they could all blank. So, it's not like you're missing out a lot. So, and then if you do have a free hit, don't worry about this gap to other teams, because hopefully when you will free hit in 34 or 37, you can make that gap back. So it's not about losing ground in a particular week. The rank at the end of the week is all that matters.
Agreed.
Okay, Colm Burglar is asking, I'm not free hitting in 32 as I've got 10 players. I have one transfer. Should I use it to bring in a goalkeeper, or should I use it to basically get a Haaland to a Jesus? So basically the idea is quality over quantity. So he's got 10 players. He could get an 11th with a free transfer, but he wouldn't have the
transfer.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have the right 11, right? Or he could use that transfer and put out still 10 players, but you could use it to do a Jesus and get the third Arsenal attacker or something like that. Where are you with that? Quality over quantity.
When's he playing his free hit?
Well, we don't know. Maybe he doesn't have one. Or he's wildcarding in 33.
He's wildcarding in 33. I would go for Jesus.
I think so. I think quality, right? Get your right players and then wildcard out of it.
He can fix everything in 33, so it's not as if he's going to sell Haaland this week and suddenly panic and think, I have to buy him back straight away, or,
Yeah.
I suppose buy the player of the ceiling.
Yeah. So general advice is go for the highest hit players that you think will get the most points. Don't worry if it's not 10 or not 11.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for other people in terms of what teams they should target and what path they should take, if you check out last week's video, it's still relevant. We talked about what are the routes that you could take if you're not free hitting. If you're free hitting in 34 or free hitting in 37, which are the teams to target and vice versa. So check that out. But we wanted to sort of, those are all the questions we got on non-free hits. But now is the big reveal from Hibbo on the 100-point free hit team, which is basically the one on your screen now. So do you want to read it out?
Yeah, it's pretty template. So on goal, I've got Sam Johnson, Crystal Palace goalkeeper. I've got Trippier at the back. I've got double Liverpool defence with Trent and Robbo. I have Saka, Salah, Martinelli, Madison, Gabriel Jesus, Ivan Toney, and Watkins, and then my bench is basically fodder enough. This is very subject to change, Pras, if I'm being totally honest, because as you know, I like save a lot of my thinking about fantasy until later in the week, because I don't really. Sometimes I think it's wasted energy, because if like Neil's going to give us the update from press conferences and then players are like ruled in and ruled out, I don't like to waste too much time to think about my side. But but that's true. Like the general thinking behind this team is double Liverpool defence. Liverpool are like 55% fancied for a clean sheet. Palace are 41% fancied for a clean sheet. Trippier is a bit of a kind of defensive EO chicken play by me, because I'm a wee bit afraid to leave him out in case he could clean. If he cleans, he gets bonus. That's like just how it works. There's always a assist potential. So he could do 9-10 points or whatever, and I kind of look at that and think, on my free hit, do I want to back against Trippier and the chance that he could like completely slaughter me by just doing Trippier things? And I don't really think I want to go there. I want to be safe. I completely accept your point there in the show, and the fact that if I'm going with single Newcastle defence and it's Trippier, I might as well not have Newcastle defence. And in a way, if you're going to do that, you nearly should back against, but I might just be a chicken. Saka, I love. Martinelli has been amazing recently. Salah, do you know what I will say about Salah? And I think Salah's had a bit of a rough ride this season, where like people have talked about his like output dropping off. And I thought this was interesting. He's like on 180 points. He's had 2 penalties this year. He's missed both. And I think Haaland's on 227 points, and he's had 6 penalties and he scored them all. That in itself is variance. Like in Salah's best years, he's maybe had early in the season 5 penalties, I think, one year early in the season. And that's why he's been able to put up the big score. So I don't actually think Salah has tailed off as much. I think his underlines are much the same. He's my captain this week, without a doubt. I don't even have to give it a second thought. Madison's up in the air for me. Jesus is up in the air for me. Jesus could become Solanke. Tony, I'm a wee bit in the fence way as well. So, like, really, how I could change this team is Jesus could become Odegaard, and Madison would drop out, and then in Jesus' spot, I would put maybe Solanke in there. So I'm trying to think of what kind of amendments I would make to that team. The other option is they do what you're doing and like pull one of my Liverpool players on the midfield, like say like a Gakpo or something like that. But I'll be waiting the news. I'll be waiting to see what kind of sounds come out about certain players and what we hear in the press conferences as we move towards Friday. Really,
Klopp's going to tell you he loved the performance. He's very happy with the boys. He's not going to sort of... You have to make your decision on the three. Liverpool sort of absent any new Neil quotes. I think you might get a leak. I mean, as people might know, it's a Friday deadline and Arsenal are the first team. So maybe we get something in terms of the starting 11. But I think you can assume it's going to be Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, Jesus as the starters.
I think so.
So you have
if there is a curveball, like if they they could curveball, I suppose, with a Friday. I didn't really think about that, the Friday deadline. Like if they turned around last minute and said Trossard was starting, would you be interested in that?
No, but I would then want to know if which of them is not starting. Is it Martinelli or Jesus? True. I mean, I don't think I'll go for a Trossard. You never know how many minutes he gets. It could be a 55-minute thing. But having had 2 draws on the bounce, there's no way that he doesn't put out a strong team. But I do think if they're 2-0 up on the 50th minute, then alarm bells will ring on who goes off.
Yeah.
Or maybe 3-0. Let's say 3-0 up.
As you say, this is pivotal actually after dropping points in the 2 games now. Like, they need to get the one on the board, and then like playing Man City is really kind of make or break in terms of the title. It nearly feels as if the balance has swung back in Man City's favour.
Oh, heavily.
Do you know, like Man City have just looked so dominant in games recently. You know, it's just Pep has made the kind of like he was so choppy changing his defence. And now that's all kind of settled down a wee bit, you know, when he's playing the inverted fullback with Stones and stuff, and it just looks great from City, like any time I've seen it recently. But I suppose that's a football conversation rather than fantasy. Unveil your team, Pras, please.
All right, so my team. Again, I think much like yours, it's not set apart from the few big positions. So I will have a Crystal Palace defender, whether that's Johnston or Guehi, and we'll come to why it could be Guehi. Trent and Trippier are locked, and I'm not going for Trippier because I think of EO. I think because Newcastle defense at home I can back, especially on the backdrop of what's happening at Spurs, right? I mean, the wheels are falling off there, and it's not just the performance. It's basically the morale. You see the team, you see the manager, you see the fans, and I'm just willing to back against Kane in this game. And in basically, if you're backing against Kane, what you're saying is you're backing Newcastle. And I'm willing to basically, in this draft, go for double Newcastle defense, because I think if you look at shares numbers, people are talking about Moreno. He's got a better XGI than Moreno share. So if I'm saying that Newcastle defense is the best defense, if we go to the first macro slide that we had in terms of the data, Newcastle defense is the best defense in our data sample, even if there's a little bit of a drop-off at home. If I back them against a middling Spurs side, why not go for a share? But that's not a position that's settled. Let's talk about midfield. So Salah, Martinelli and Saka are pretty much locked. I think I'm there on Gakpo. I would say at this point 95% have Gakpo in my team. Between Odegaard and Jesus, I'm not there. I need to do a little bit more digging, see maybe some quotes, see what's coming out of the early team. But my instinct says Odegaard for the minutes. My instinct says that the downside for Odegaard is 1 assist. And so that's 6 points. Basically clean sheet and an assist, no bonus. Even though Odegaard, when he gets 1 return, he's basically in the bonus. The downside for Jesus is it's 2-0, 55th minute, he's taken off 1 point. So that basically, but I also get that the upside for Jesus is a hat-trick in the first half, and for Odegaard to basically get not much, one assist out of it. So I'm not there yet in terms of Odegaard versus Jesus. In attack, I think Watkins is nailed. I just can't not have Tony, man. I mean, Villa, for all good that they're doing in defense, I need to watch some Villa highlights on how their big chances are sort of, have they really dropped off? Because these guys above average FPL talk about this a lot, which is fantastic on Brentford. Basically, Brentford are built as this football manager team, which is basically they don't take pot shots. They basically create big chances. And so if you look at their
Yeah.
XG chart in games, they get big chances and they score one out of their two big chances. So if Villa are still the team, which I remember from sort of after the restart, but not more recently, they do tend to give up one or two big chances a game. Then Tony's taking them. So my view is this game is a 2-1 game to either side. And so if it's a 2-1 game, both Watkins and Tony are going to score. So why not sort of tap into both?
My opinion on Tony is I wish he was banned.
So he's not a problem. Like Mitrovic, right?
What day is it? Tuesday? Is there any chance that this from the betting allegations he gets banned before Friday? No.
Poor guy.
Or is that all?
Well, if that happens, then we're all going for Moreno as well in defense.
But no, because I really hoped he was going to get. I know some people like this. I really hoped he was going to get his 10th yellow card because he's a player that people have held on to that are approaching this, trying to navigate obviously like game week 32 without a free hit.
Yeah.
You know, they'd all pegged their hopes on Tony, and I was thinking, if he could get this yellow card, they'd be maybe forced into -4 or whatever. And also, he would be forced out of my thinking. I wouldn't have to consider Tony. And at the minute, I'm kind of a wee bit on the fence with him, where I'm thinking, similar to you, I can't not pick him. He's been so good. And I kind of wish there was an excuse for me not to pick him, but no, I feel the same.
So yeah, I mean, basically that's the team. In my bench, I've got Rhea, just as you know, in case Johnson doesn't show up. I've got Solanke first bench. I've got Moreno second, and I've got Gehi. So what can change here is basically I don't like the share spot. So I mean, he's fine as far as where I'm looking at now. I don't like. Well, between Tony and Share, I could go Solanke and Moreno. Because by going Tony and Moreno, I'm sort of, you know, am I backing Tony or am I backing the Villa defense? I'm not too sure. Even though I'm not so against it, because there's also a hedging element to it. Basically, if I go for Moreno and Tony, they're my 10th and 11th best pick on this wild card. So if I'm going for a Tony and Moreno, I'm almost saying that there's a reasonable chance one of them returns, right? If Brentford score, then Tony returns. If Villa keep a clean sheet, Tony blanks, but Moreno gets points. So between my 10th and 11th, if you guarantee me one return, I don't mind it. So Tony Moreno could be an option, but I think more likely either I go Solanke and Moreno or I go Tony and Share. Or I could go Tony, change my goalkeeper to a Leno, or maybe even play David Raya because of the stave points and the high upside in case Brentford keep a clean sheet. Because frankly, Watkins is going to be 95% owned. So for me, the Watkins versus Raya conflict isn't as much because I'll just root for a Brentford clean sheet and Watkins to blank because no one's getting Watkins points this week. Mm-hmm. So that's the thinking. So then in that case, I would not have Johnston. I would have Gehi as the third defender because ultimately, if people are going for double Liverpool attack and triple Arsenal attack, your problem is going to be this third defender. So some may just go Moreno for the attacking upside. Some may look at Share like myself for the solidity of Newcastle defense in general, not more recently. Or some may go for a different keeper and go for a Crystal Palace guy, or even go double Crystal Palace defense. Yeah. Would you go double Crystal Palace defense?
Definitely not.
Because Tarkowski's scoring.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad pick. It's just it's not that defense that I would want to kind of load under. Now, I know people could say the same about Liverpool and look at like Liverpool's defence over the season and say they're not an elite side and I've got two Liverpool defenders on my side, or they're not an elite defence. But no, in terms of Palace, I would be happy enough just with single coverage, and in this case, the keeper for saves and potentially bonuses, always the outside chance of a penalty save. But no, I think where I am is maybe a double Liverpool defence, maybe an Arsenal defender if I kind of change my tact on that. I could get Gabriel on there, and then Trippier is just really a hedge because I'm just trying to block off people making gains on me on that one player. So it's a bit of a negative approach because I'm going to potentially have Trippier in that boat. I'm potentially going to have Watkins in that boat. But I think the one that we'll all go against is maybe Kane, as we've said, because how strong Newcastle have been and the issues that Spurs have at the minute, despite this consistency, the fact that hopefully he gets no more than 6 points, I think we could celebrate that as a win.
I think Kane's going to be under 20% EO. So I don't think there's any
I think
worry
so.
on Kane, because think about it this way. If you're on a free hit, I think the template is not going to have Kane in it. Some may have it. If you're on a free hit, then you probably don't have Kane. If you're not on a free hit, you will not. It'll be hard to sell Haaland and get him back. People will want Salah, so it makes it very difficult to go Salah, Trent, Kane, and Haaland. So I think the non-free hitters will basically struggle to have Kane or start Kane, and if they do, I think it's worth backing against it.
Yeah, that's where I am with Kane too. I think he hasn't really entered me thinking as much as what I thought he would. Once I started to sit down and make tinker with drafts, he hasn't really been on my thoughts as much as that. So no, happy to be back against. I think famous last words.
Excellent. I think that's been a very nice, comprehensive review of. I mean, I tend to listen to a lot of content on Free Hit Week because I'm just thinking it's 1 week, even though there's a lot of variance in that 1 week, right? But you want to get that last decision right. You can make unlimited transfers. It's Wildcard Week and Free Hit Week where you want to sort of listen to everyone's views. You're not missing anything. These little nuggets like early team news and this team's defensive form versus these stats. I mean, there can be a lot of information as well, but I think this is the week where people should pay attention. But remember, the last 3-4 picks are basically all good picks. So go with your gut.
100%.
Excellent. Thank you for joining, Hibbo. Good luck with the rest of the season. Good luck with the free hit. Good luck with the baby. We didn't talk about it at the beginning, but obviously you've just had a baby boy. So good luck managing all of these things.
Thank you. My hands are full at the minute. That's me. I've got 3 children now, a full-time job, and a fantasy team to manage. So, it's busy. It is busy, I have to say. But I'm kind of glad that the season's kind of dwindling out to an end. And I suppose my last hope is that I turn this 24k into top 10k. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
It's a difficult season, especially when everyone is on the same or a similar path in terms of chip strategy, transfers. I mean, I've been frustrated since game week 26 because we've had about 3 options every week, one of these 3 things, instead of a whole gamut of things that you can look at or different directions where you can go. I think there's a small select of people who are looking at free hit 34 or something like that, or non-free hit. But the masses, as you said, are on a same path.
Yeah. No, I completely, I think the way the game has gone in recent years too, I think 10k is, you need a lot of luck and you need a lot of variance to get within that top 10k. There's no doubt about that. I think years ago you can make consistently good decisions and you could get inside it, whereas now I think you need lots of luck. So if I wouldn't be disappointed if I missed out, if you know that kind of way. But
at least you're close. I mean, I'm at 90k. My target is 50k. We'll see if we get there.
We'll see. Hopefully a big jump this week.
Hope so. Okay, on that note, thank you very much again, Hibbo. Thank you for listening. Good to have you on, and we'll get Sonaldo back next week once he's over his shock of not owning Watkins. And he won't have Watkins again for, Fulham at home. So we will see. Okay, everyone. Take care.
See you.